Now, our community does an amazing job with local mission. Our world mission is invisible. At the moment, we have partnerships with 4 mission co-workers, and the only reason we have these is that individuals in our congregation reached out and began correspondence with the co-workers. The Parkers serve in Lebanon, and Judy Oder heard them speak and reached out to follow their work. Jenny Bent and Mark Hare are in Costa Rica. They were originally from our presbytery, and Susan Immel has stayed in touch with them. The Teskis followed the Ludwigs in Niger, and when they retired, our commission reached out to Jim McGill in Niger, and Mark Erbaugh has established a relationship with him. And I heard Doug Dick speak to our presbytery in 2021, and after the visit from Reverend Zumot last fall, I started to follow his work because he's in Jerusalem. This series of 6 Sundays will introduce you to World Mission and these mission co-workers. Our first speaker is the Reverend Dr. Mary Nebelsick, Mission Associate for Mission Interpretation. She is Zooming with us from Louisville. She's going to be the only one from the United States. And she's in the same time zone, so it works. Now, Mary's going to set the stage for the following weeks. She will talk about how the church's approach to mission work has evolved, how mission co-workers are called, and what role mission co-workers serve. She is willing to take questions throughout, so you don't have to wait till the end if something pops up. So, Mary, it's yours.
Oh, some of you, and I love this. When Beth invited me, I, of course, being slightly techie, went to the website and I discovered that within the leadership of your congregation, you have 2 pastors who knew my parents, especially my father. Yes, because he was a professor at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. So for the 2 of you, some of this might be just slightly redundant. So I'm just going to set the broad stage, and we're going to go back all the way to 1810, because Beth asked me to talk just a little bit about how mission has evolved, and that's a little bit difficult if I don't talk just a little bit about 1810. And then I will talk about 1837, and then we will jump for about 100 years to when my parents entered mission service as what was then called fraternal workers. We'll then do a little bit of another little jump to 2001, which is when my husband and I entered mission service. And in each of these, certain things have been retained within the Presbyterian understanding of how a ministry is done internationally with partners in the United States, and other things have changed and other things have stayed the same. So I'll do this a little bit, and then I'll talk about how fabulous the mission coworkers are that you all have supported individually and through prayers, hopefully as a congregation, and talk about how our mission coworkers serve. So this is sort of the very broad outline. And then I really hope that there are questions that you have that I can answer. So let us jump to 1810. This is when the American Board of Foreign Missions was established through a spiritual awakening that happened with the, at this point, young men of Williams College. And the Presbyterians and the Congregationalists joined this, and they sent young men out into places like China and India. And these were young men who I learned at what was called the New Wilmington Missions Conference, which if you would like to attend a mission conference to see what is happening now, this would be a great thing to do in July. I learned that a lot of these young men went into the foreign mission field carrying their caskets because they knew that the call to foreign ministry or call to foreign mission would likely involve them not coming back. So their commissioning service included a saying goodbye, not only to the United States, but to their lives. In 1837, so this little jump, in 1837, the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America established what was then called the Foreign Missionary Society. And so again, these were men and young men, and as well as later, interestingly enough, young women who were commissioned by the church at large, individual churches, and individual women's circles. And so there are these fabulous journals that were published called Woman's Work for Woman, and you can get them online by a place called Hattie Trust. And these are young women who are writing back to the women's circles who are supporting them. So women's circles supported women who were individuals who would go to places like Iran and establish girls' schools. They would, the Ministry Society of the Presbyterian Church would support what we would now consider education, especially education of girls. They would advocate against the enslavement of people and advocate against the enslavement of girls, all the way back to the 1800s in places like Egypt and Iran. So it's very, very interesting to read all of these things. So we're going to jump again until the time post-World War II. My parents were commissioned by the Presbyterian Church to go to Berlin in 1956 in order to staff what were then these refugee centers. So I think we have a lot of memory that is lost. But if you understand what happened after World War II, Germany was divided into 4 different zones, and Berlin itself was divided into 4 different zones. But the city of Berlin was like a lollipop in the middle of what was the Eastern Zone, and there was one road that went from Berlin to what was Western Berlin, and the churches all got together and said, we understand that there are huge numbers of refugees fleeing from the Eastern Zone into the Western Zone of Berlin, and we need to take care of these refugees. And so this is what my parents were commissioned to do. A friend of mine asked for some historical documents, and so I went into the basement, opened the box that had a lot of their material, and I discovered that not only, even in the 1950s, not only was my father commissioned and got, the little card, the little ID card, but my mother got one as well. And so she was equally commissioned with my father under the name fraternal worker, because after World War II, the churches became aware that a more, colonial, if you want the word that's being used now, attitude towards the churches that were vibrant and had long been established in those areas that they had begun to minister to, that this was not the way that we should conceive of a ministry. We should conceive of it, in terms of partnership. We should conceive of it in terms of the great ends of the church. We should conceive of it as a union of all of the Christian churches who are ministering together for the glory of God. And so the Presbyterian Church has understood this long ago, pre-World War II, but it came to the fore after World War II, when countries like the Philippines in 1948 and India were saying we are no longer colonial holdings. We are our own independence. And so the Presbyterian Church has long understood itself as being a church that responds to the realities of the world in which it finds itself in order to continue to have a vibrant ministry. And therefore, they decided that they would change the word from missionary, which had already had sort of an idea of us better than them. We are bringing something to them, to fraternal co-worker, because the idea was we are all working together. And we are not, that the Spirit of God moves among us equally. And we are not individuals in this task. We are doing God's mission as a church in communion with other people and in communion with other churches. And so this is not a new, people are talking about it again now, but this isn't new. This is long established within the Presbyterian consciousness, which is something I love. And it was then in Berlin that I was born, and my two brothers were born, and my father and mother were fraternal workers in Berlin. Worked with, then moved to minister with a newly established congregation with the friends, the former students of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And then after a stint in at the God Box in New York City, my father worked there for a while and didn't feel that was where God had called him to be. We went to Beirut, Lebanon, and were there for 5 years, where my father was a professor at the Neary School of Theology. And my childhood was such that my parents were taking this understanding of ministering with congregations very seriously. So we did not integrate as children with the American church much. We did a little bit, but not much. Instead, we attended the German church, which was pastored by a student of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's, and we attended the German school. So, and when we played outside, we didn't live in anything like a missionary compound. We lived in an apartment building. I played outside with children who spoke Arabic, and we shopped across the street from the gentleman who spoke Arabic. And so this entire upbringing was very much an international upbringing, not one that was focused on an American setting. So then fast forward again, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1968, partially because my brother and my younger brother and I were born with hair lips, and my father was very concerned that we could not get the medical care that we needed to do lots of reconstructive surgery, which I have had, in order to that we could move forward happily in our lives. So he was called to Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and this is where I grew up. We'll jump again past my college years at Wellesley and my seminary years at Princeton and my graduate school years at Heidelberg, and we will come back to the U.S. to be in Texas. And then I began to terribly miss the international flavor that I had as a child, and so we went to applied as we did to the Presbyterian Church. There was a position open in the Philippines, and so we applied through the a regular sort of application process, and then we're called to the Philippines. Now, this is another thing that Beth wanted me to touch upon, the way in which we were prepared to go to the Philippines. So it was very important to the Presbyterian Church when we applied, and we were told this, that we didn't have any preconceived notions about how we were going to influence somebody else. That in our discussions about why we felt called to mission service, there wasn't anything in our discussion about we thinking that we were going to bring anything other than ourselves and the knowledge that we had accrued through our academic journey, because we were being called to a seminary, and through our pastoral journey because we were being called to a seminary. And our training was such that we had a 3-week training of mission history in the United States, and then our main training for ministry happened in the Philippines. So we spent 3 months learning a language, learning the language, or the bit of the language, and being introduced by the church, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, being introduced by them to their concept of ministry and their concept of mission. And so our education was not one that was in the U.S. for someone else. It was about us. How could we contribute? How could the UCCP weave us into their ministry so that we could go forward together? And this was, I continued, of course, my language training by picking myself up and going to the market and just being absolutely silly, talking to people and joking around and laughing and learning the language. And this is how I learned the language. And of course, we learned the theology of the UCCP within the context, as well as the theology from our students, and we learned huge things. The tradition of angels and demons is still very much alive, and the understanding of the spirituality that is among all peoples that contribute is also very much alive within the Philippines, and something I have grown. I appreciate tremendously. So I'm going to stop here and see if you have any questions before I go on. I've been talking for about 19 minutes.
So. I've got a question here. Good. So did you select the Philippines, or did the Philippines select you? And then when you got to the Philippines and went through your training, what your eventual site that you were placed in, how was that done?
That was done through communication. So the way it works is that a partner church, in this case, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, the partner church let the Presbyterian Church know that it desired, that it would welcome, it would welcome partners in ministry. And so now we're called mission co-workers. So the fraternal fell away simply because that became, fraternal. Anyway, they let the Presbyterian Church know that they would welcome someone in ministry in a certain context. And then what happened is that the Presbyterian Church then put that up on their website. And just like if you're looking for a new pastor, you know how you go through it's called CRC, Church CLC, Church Leadership Connection. So they put that up on their website, and then in the exact same way as a pastor who is looking for a new call goes to this Church Leadership Connection, we went to the website. And then we contacted the Presbyterian Church and went through about a 6-month-long process where we filled out forms. I got Presbyterian forms, and then we were interviewed by the Presbyterian Church, and then they submitted our names to the United Church of Christ in the Philippines. And so then the United Church of Christ in the Philippines looked at, through discussion with them, with those people who had interviewed us, as well as all of our documents. They took a look and they invited us. So we were invited into ministry with the UCCP in a similar way as a congregation would invite a minister into ministry with them. So it's a very interesting sort of model. And then we went. So because we were the supervisory role, the role of the person who evaluated our ministry was always first the UCCP. And so I developed, because we're Presbyterian, we don't have bishops, but the UCCP does have bishops. And so the bishops of the UCCP were responsible for us, and we were responsible for them. And so I developed a really caring and loving relationship with the bishops of the UCCP, to the extent that when one of them got sick, I went to give blood for him. Because anytime I had a question about whether or not I was doing the right thing, or a question about my ministry, I would go to the president of the seminary, who was also very dear to us and really loving and caring and kind. And I would also go to the bishops. So if ever I had a question, I would not go to anyone in Louisville. I would stay, in country, because that is what you do as a coworker. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not a us over them ever. It is a we together. How do we multiply the love of God? How do we, I love these great ends of the church, but how do we do the exhibition of social righteousness? How do we increase worship? And so when we were there, we never ever went, well, once or twice as a visitors, to an American church. We were invited, as professors, we were invited to be godparents of our students, and so we always went to their churches. Every Sunday we went to. We picked one of our godsons because of a curious little incident, but he invited us. Our godson invited us, and so for years, for about the 6 years, we attended his church and were part of his congregation and a loving part of this what we call Presbytery, but they call something else. And we participated fully in the life of the church as someone who they were weaving into their ministry. And so that's how I understood it. So are there any other questions? So Beth, okay, if I go on to the sacramental nature of the people that you all have called to be in ministry with you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay.
We have another question. Hang on.
Okay. Yeah.
I was wondering were you a minister? Were you helping to advise the congregations on growing their ministry? I know that you've said some things, but I'm just on the ground, like day to day, what was going on in your mission work?
I was a professor of biblical studies. So I was teaching courses in Old Testament little bit of Hebrew. uh, that's what I was doing when I first came. And then because the seminary no longer needed us, because we had already built up students who would take over the work, the teaching that we had done. We were asked to move to a university, Philippine Christian University, which was the umbrella under which Union Theological Seminary lived. And so then because I love kids, they invited me to be part of their chaplaincy program. Again, I never led, really. I worked with the chaplaincy program. So I organized the chaplaincy program on two different campuses, or helped organize, facilitate, use all sorts of different words. And I did this for everyone from age 3, which is, universities have little preschools associated with them. Everybody from age 3 to the deans. And we had Bible studies. And this was just great. I love this. And then I taught, my husband, Paul Matheny, and I established a graduate program with PhDs. And I was the Master of Theology coordinator. So we continued more in education, but we didn't give advice on the growth of the church. I mean, that's not. We participated in the church. I could no more give advice on the growth of the church to the Philippine church than I could fly. They have a long and distinguished a history, and they're fabulous, and they're dedicated, and they're socially active and spiritually alive. I mean, I just appreciated the life of the vibrancy and the life of those congregations, and their tenacity. I mean, their tenacity is just amazing. So does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
One more question. What is the ratio of Christianity to other faiths generally in the Philippines, and which way is it going now?
Yes, it's huge. As a matter of fact, the Roman Catholic Church came to the Philippines 400 years ago, and the Roman Catholic Church's involvement in the Philippines has been described, and I don't want to speak pejoratively, but it has been described by Protestants as being sort of a cross and a sword, because they did come. Spain conquered the Philippines, and then they established Christianity. But this does not mean that the devotion of the Filipinos these days to the Roman Catholic Church is any less spiritually motivated. It isn't motivated because they came in that way. It is motivated because of a deep personal connection with the institution of the church. Now, I'm a little bit prejudiced because I got to know the present Archbishop of the Philippines, and I can tell you about that at some other time. He's just fabulous. But I got to know him because of a Cavite Ecumenical Fellowship, because he was the bishop in the area in which I was, and I was invited again by him to participate in the ministry of the area, to know what was going on. But when the Protestants came to the Philippines in the 1890s, they came because the Filipinos themselves at that point were not being able to read the Bible. And so the idea was, we will establish educational institutions, and if people can read the Bible for themselves, then they will be awakened to the multifaceted ways that God is in the world, and their spiritual life will be enriched, and they will be able individually, without the mediation of a priest, they will be able to speak to God themselves, and God will be able to enter their lives more fully. So that was the Protestant call to the Philippines. And so right now, Christianity, because the Roman Catholic Church dominates Christian spirituality, it is about Protestantism is about 10%, depending on whose figures you're using. I would say Protestantism is about 10%. Islam, again, history, but Islam is also growing in the Philippines. I would say it's probably about 7%, and then Roman Catholicism, and then there are others, and then Roman Catholicism is probably about 70%. So I know these figures don't add up. I could find them for you.
No. I just wanted to know generally. Pardon my ignorance. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the one of the things that as far as the Philippines goes, prior to the Christianity coming to the Philippines, prior to this, the Filipinos had a deep spiritual tradition that involved communion with God through spirits and through individuals and through spiritual practices. So that is not new. That was never new. It was just that was sort of harnessed in a different way. So if you on the news recently, there was somewhere on the news there was a report about how in the Philippines there is an active reenactment of the last days of Jesus Christ, which includes self-flagellation, which includes hanging from the cross, because of this spiritual call to be one with Christ in all aspects. So suffering is not seen as any kind of a punishment. It's a union with Christ in Christ suffering for the world. So I could talk forever about this, but
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So when Beth called and she told me which mission coworkers this congregation individually had walked alongside of, I became very excited about it. Not only because Scott and Elmarie Parker are in Beirut, which is the still somehow, even though I'm a bit older and it was a bit long ago, still somehow that is the place where my heart lies. I even went back to Google Maps and found the apartment building that I think is probably destroyed now because of the bomb blast, where my brothers and I grew up. And so I have this deep, abiding connection to this land, as well as to Doug Dix's ministry, because he and Elmarie Parker minister with congregations that have been around since Jesus in Doug Dix, because he ministers in Bethlehem as well. He writes a lot about Bethlehem. Since the very beginnings of Christianity, this is the crucible of Christianity, and these congregations, Palestinian congregations and Lebanese congregations. I mean, you all know the story of the Syrophoenician woman, right? It's biblical. It's there when you go, and I hope you do go sometime. You breathe somehow a spiritual and the air of millennia long connections with the ministry and the saving the ministry of Jesus Christ. And so I love this, that your congregation was walking alongside these two mission coworkers. And then Jim McGill, I hope you are reading his newsletters. I mean, Jim McGill digs wells. Jim McGill comes from Minnesota. If you see his photograph, he's He's a rugged individual. His wife Jody established medical clinics so that young women could be trained for neonatal to bring children into the world. And so you have the nature. You've got water. You have the waters of baptism. You have the waters that Jesus turned into wine. And then you have Mark Hare and Jenny Bent, and Mark Hare has been in ministry since, I don't know, 30 years. And he and his wife recently, as in the last 3 years, Jenny, have moved to Costa Rica. And I hope he sent me lots of photographs at Christmas time. So I created a photo album. So if you go on his website, you can see his photo album of the ways in which he is working to create food for the planet. And so you have, again, this idea of bread, and you have the idea of water, and you have the idea of wine, and the early spiritual communities, which to whom we as American Presbyterians, I mean, these are the gifts of God, for the people of God. And the way that your congregation is supporting ministry with these congregations in Niger, and Jim McGill also works a little bit still in South Sudan, where the Ludwigs were. And then you have the ancient Palestinian Christians whose brothers and sisters grandparents were the brothers and sisters of Jesus and walked with him. And you have the early Christian traditions in Lebanon, and then you have those who are providing bread or food and sustenance for the community of faith with the UBL in Costa Rica. So it is quite an amazing panoply that you all are supporting. And so I was just amazed when Beth was telling me about this. And
question
then
for you.
so
How are these mission workers,
yes,
their sites, how are they assessed? I mean, you mentioned Lebanon, you got Costa Rica, okay, you got Niger, etc. Now you got different missionary. How are they assessed? Are they ever closed down? Does Louisville ever say, "Hey, this isn't working the way we want it to," or this? So, is there an evaluation process?
oh yeah. So we are as generous as we are.
Yeah.
We are Presbyterian. We've got a structure. Ooh, do we have a structure? All right, here we go. Are you ready? All right.
Yeah.
There is. There is. I'm just going to do World Mission. All right. World Mission has a director, and then the director, under the director, who is Minda Uriarte, who used to be my area coordinator, there is a Global Connections office that is staffed by Ellen Sherby. I'm sorry about all these names, but you asked, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ellen Sherby. And so she is my direct supervisor. All right. Under Ellen Sherby, there are the supported mission areas like mine, which is Mission Connections, that support mission coworkers. So we'll say this is staff, right? All right. Under Ellen, there are 4 different areas. The area of Africa, where Jim McGill is, the area of Latin America and the Caribbean, which is where Jenny Bent and Mark Hare are seconded. Let's use Presbyterian words, seconded. All right, and then we have Latin America and Caribbean, right? They go together, and then Europe and Middle East, which is where Doug Dix and the Parkers are seconded, and then Asia. So you all don't have Asia at the moment. So you have these three. Each of these is staffed, and I'm so sorry about this. Each of these is staffed by an area coordinator. Under the area coordinators, again, I apologize, there are people called regional liaisons. Elmarie Parker is a regional liaison, and they usually, unless there is some huge turmoil in the country, they usually live, as Elmarie does, live in the country in which they serve. And it is in conversation between the regional liaison and the partner church that mission co-workers are evaluating. So so the partner church, so there are every 4 years, so a term is 4 years. Every 4 years, there is this huge evaluation with paperwork, because, we are Presbyterian, affidavits and letters and evaluations of both and it begins with the partner church. If a partner church has changed its ministry focus, then they will say, so for example, in Asia, the mission co-workers who were in Hong Kong were no longer invited back to Hong Kong because Hong Kong was not stable. And so the ministry partners in Hong Kong said, this mission co-worker has done a fabulous job. However, it's not really stable here anymore. And then the mission co-worker said, we would still like to continue to serve. And so they are now serving in a similar capacity in Thailand. And then the Presbyterian church said, well, all of the evaluations have been really excellent, and they would like to continue to serve, and we would like to continue to support them. Is there somewhere else that we have, is there another church that asked for someone in this capacity? And there was, and so now they're in Thailand. So this is how, it's always a conversation, and there's always an ebb and flow. And so when we came back, from the Philippines, it was because the Presbyterian church said, we are changing our focus. You in your capacity, Paul and myself, have already built up the necessary leadership for this seminary and for this university. It can be taken over. It can be officially under the umbrella. They don't need you anymore, basically, they said. And we are now we really want to focus on human trafficking in the area. That is going to be the new Presbyterian focus in this area. And so we were not renewed, and the people, Kathy Chang and Juan Lopez, whose focus was on what the Presbyterian Church was then focusing on. They are now mission co-workers there, continuing the loving tradition. I have a great relationship with them. The loving tradition that we had established in Presbyterian mission co-workers have always had with the UCCB. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We have another question over here.
I think it would be very helpful for our group if you would explain how the mission co-workers are financed so that they can go into their missions, because we have helped finance 2 sets now.
Yes. So what happens is that mission co-workers are financed from donations from individual congregations to what is now called the One Fund. It's got this fancy name. So congregations send money in honor of mission co-workers to the Presbyterian Church, and they are paid out of that pot. Does that help, or does that?
No, I we're familiar with that, but I don't think people realize that the co-workers actually have to help market themselves.
But that's changed, and that's what she's saying. It goes to one fund now. So you can't say, I want to send it to the Parkers.
Because we used to send it to Presbyterian USA, and they had a code for their mission. So you on your check, you put your code, that code on.
Right. And so now you don't need to put that. I can give you the code. There is a code, but it's a code for everybody.
Okay.
And so
It's to help.
yeah.
They don't have
Yeah. That's very helpful.
Right. But the concern has been, and it's for me a bit heartbreaking. The concern has been, oh well, since they don't have to, market, they don't have to raise funds, or however you want to put that word. Therefore, the engagement with congregations is less, and that is absolutely not true. I mean, our mission coworkers they get joy. Their joy is to connect with congregations, and they will stay up to the wee hours of the morning to Zoom with congregations as they can. And part of my responsibility is to connect mission coworkers, connect mission coworkers with congregations through updating their website. So their letters are on their website, and if you like their letters, I have a monetary constraint of not being able to print their letters in color, and so the pictures always look flat. They've got these gorgeous pictures with these gorgeous colors, and they send them to me. Doug Dick sends me 10 to 12 photographs every single time. And I can't put them in the newsletter. I have space constraints. But if you go to his website, you can see all of his fabulous photographs. He's an excellent photographer in living color, just beautiful. So I do their profiles, so you know what they're doing, in general. Their letters, which is on their website, I send out letters to congregations, and then I help connect mission coworkers to congregations through interpretation assignment. And so last year, total, I sent out about 50,000 letters.
It's different than our experience because Rachel Ludwig would actually just email us and give and before the Ludwigs, and I've got a terrible senior moment, we supported a medical mission in the Congo. He was an OBGYN. Both teams were from this local area, and she was a nurse practitioner.
Right.
And
yes.
They would write to us again directly.
Right, and they can, because our mission coworkers. So some mission coworkers have a blog. They send things directly. They have MailChimp. I don't know if the Ludwigs did it through MailChimp. Then this is how they keep congregations updated. Then they have their the letters that I edit, and then the letters on their page. So mission coworkers, as you pointed out, mission coworkers individually have different ways of connecting with their supporting congregations, and some do it one way, and some do it another way. So I'm really happy that Rachel is able to do that. I met her at the New Wilmington Mission Conference. So her dad, Don Dawson, was in charge of this New Wilmington Mission Conference for many, many years. So I would encourage you all perhaps to go once. As a group or individually. I went last year. It was such an eye-opening and spiritually enriching experience. So I do hope that some of you get that chance. I won't be there this year. I'll tell you that if you want to know later. Any more questions?
Anything else we want to ask?
If the contributions go into one pot, is it distributed equally to all mission coworkers?
Yes.
So did you hear Barbara's question?
I didn't hear the response.
And so you said yes?
All mission coworkers, all I can say is all mission coworkers are funded from this one fund.
Who makes the determination
Who makes the determination
of who gets what?
of who gets what?
How much?
So
Is that from Louisville?
we are Presbyterians.
Oh, okay.
Structure. And there are finance people. And there are finance people. And there are mission engagement specialists. And they who do that, they who God has called for that particular ministry are the ones who do that.
Okay. And I'm sure it has much to do with their living circumstances and other factors.
And yes, so if you want to know about the financial particulars, I would really encourage you to talk to Lauren Rogers. Now, Lauren is she's from Ministry Engagement Specialists. And ministry, she's new, so she's not on the website. She knows I'm coming here today, by the way, just so you know. And that would be a fabulous question to ask Lauren, because they are the ones who work with congregations to encourage them to be involved in ministry, both internationally and locally. And so she is the one with the answers to those questions, and she knows the right words, and she answers emails immediately. And so if ever I have a question about how to say a certain thing, I always ask Lauren, and then Lauren answers me. So please talk to Lauren about those questions. But I can tell you that our mission coworkers are funded by the general fund. That mission coworkers generally receive, as far as so I can't talk about now because I don't know particulars about finances. But when we were in when we were serving with the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, my husband and I received the exact same salary as other mission coworkers in the Philippines. The only difference as far as I know, again, this is history, right? So please talk to Lauren about how this is done. And there is a whole team who know who God has called to this kind of ministry, and they are the ones who make these determinations.
Thank you very much, Mary. This has been terrific and a great setting the stage for the next 5 weeks of programming. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I enjoyed myself thoroughly. All the personal stuff.
No, it was good. Thank you so much.